Is that voice in your head your intuition talking to you, or is that ego? So there's a few key tells that you can use to figure out the difference. How do I know? Well, I'm a witch, and intuition is really the basis of everything that I do when it comes to my spiritual practice. So I've spent a lot of time learning about it and listening to it. So, learning to follow my intuition has been by far the most important spiritual lesson for me as a witch. But it can be difficult to tell from other pesky voices in your head, like anxiety, ego, or fear. So, in this video, we're going to get into 4 ways to tell the difference between ego and intuition. But before we do, I just wanted to welcome you to the channel. If you're new here, hi, my name's Erin. This is What a Witch Knows. If you find you're enjoying the content, it's useful to you, I'd love to have you subscribe to the channel and please like the video to help it circulate in the algorithm. So I have done a lot of content already on intuition, what it is, how to follow it. I've also done a series on how to tell the difference between intuition and anxiety. So all of that is going to be linked in the description below. And please check those out as well. I'm also planning a series after this on how to tell the difference between intuition and fear. And so you can be alerted every time I upload a new video about intuition. Please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. So your intuition is the voice of your higher self. That's the part of you that's connected to the vast interconnected web of energy and purpose that witches know as spirit. Some people call this God. We all have different names for it, but witches believe that spirit is conscious, divine, and incredibly powerful. Your intuition is one way that spirit communicates with you, and witches know that spirit is talking to you all the time. So, when you're first learning to listen to your intuition, it can sometimes get drowned out by other messages that don't originate from spirit. They originate from the social matrix. So, all of that programming that, I should be this way because I should do this because, this is expected of me because. So, all of those layers of societal expectations lead to those voices from ego, anxiety, and fear. And you can easily confuse those with your intuition when you're just starting out. Now, there will be a lot of overlap between the voices of ego, anxiety, and fear. And there are some similarities between those three, but all of those three are very different from intuition. So for the purposes of this video, we're focusing on ego versus intuition. So the first way to tell the difference between ego and intuition is the voice of ego is concerned with what other people will think. It will say, I need to make sure that this project is absolutely perfect so my boss thinks I'm a good employee. Or I need to lose 15 pounds so everyone at this wedding that I'm going to in the fall will think that I look good. So intuition is not going to care about any of that. It's going to say, don't go into work today. One morning you're going to have no idea why it's saying that to you, but it's not concerned with what your boss will think, if your boss is going to be mad if you don't go into work, or what your coworkers will think, or anything like that. It's just a clear, simple directive, and it will come with a deep sense of knowingness, like, oh, I really shouldn't go into work today, but you won't have any idea why in the moment it's telling you to do that. Now, sometimes what will happen is that later on, in hindsight, you'll get a confirmation like, oh, there was a car wreck on my usual route to work. That's why my intuition was giving me that message. It was trying to keep me safe. Sometimes you won't get any confirmation at all, but I always recommend following your intuition, even if it's going to impact, the shoulds and the what will people thinks and all of those things. But sometimes, what it's doing is it's trying to keep you safe, and your intuition is always going to talk to you the loudest when it's about danger. So that's actually one of the 7 types of intuition that I talk about in my playlist that I'll link down below. So the second way you can tell intuition from ego is that intuition will speak in actions and ego will speak in outcomes. So for example, your intuition says, don't go into work today, turn right, call your mom. That's it. It's an action. It's simple to follow, and it's pretty short and direct. There's usually not a lot of extra explanation or details. Your ego, on the other hand, will talk to you in some sort of, sometimes unwanted or catastrophic outcome. So for example, I'm going to look stupid, or everyone will think that I didn't put in enough work on this project, or my mom will think I'm not a good daughter. So usually the follow-up to that is, if I don't do XYZ, then this bad outcome will happen. And it can sometimes spiral from one bad outcome into another. So my boss will be mad at me, I'll be fired, I won't be able to pay my mortgage, and the spiral just keeps on spiraling. And usually, the thing your ego is trying to encourage you to do is maybe not something that you want to do or that feels good in your heart, but it's something that was prescribed to you by society. It wants you to do something that you quote unquote should do. Now, just a side note to that second tell, sometimes ego will talk to you in the opposite of an undesirable outcome, and it will talk to you in a fairy tale outcome. Usually this outcome relies on exterior sources like people or opportunities. So, for example, if I just get this job, then my life will be amazing. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have a fairy tale, you can. But where you start to get into trouble is when you start to hitch those exterior factors and your happiness together. So no prince is coming to rescue you, okay? I think we've all had to learn that the hard way. You can have that fairy tale, we all can, but you have to rescue yourself. And that's a very long and unsexy process, of healing and building and being kind to yourself and unlearning societal expectations and learning to follow your intuition. That's a big one. So happiness or fulfillment is not something that comes like wrapped up in a bow from a source outside yourself. Happiness comes from inside yourself. But your ego wants to control the world outside you, right? So it gives you these messages like, I have to make sure this person does this one thing and then I'll be happy. That's a big no-no. That control element also shows up a lot of the times with anxiety. I don't know how this is going to turn out, so I need to control this outcome. If you've seen Inside Out 2, that's a great example. So listening to your intuition is actually a much more efficient way to get you to your fairy tale, abundant, beautiful life because it's the voice of your higher self. It knows why you're here. It designed that plan for you to have that beautiful life. You have, free will, so you can choose to listen to your ego over your intuition. But it's constantly, your intuition is trying to nudge you towards that quote unquote highest timeline. You just have to learn to listen to it and discard all those layers of societal expectations that's making you overrule it. Now, a third way that you can tell the difference between intuition and ego is that ego will try to convince you that you're better than other people. This is not my favorite thing to talk about, guys. It's just a very yucky one, but it's an important one, okay? So just so you guys know, I believe very deeply that everyone is equal. It's really, really core to my beliefs and my spirituality. So this is one that I've worked really hard to recognize in myself and just smash it out of existence the second it comes up. So it doesn't mean that you can't believe in your own inherent worth because you are inherently worthy of love and happiness and success. You should believe that. And it doesn't mean that you can't believe in your own talents because you are talented. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that when it's a situation where the voice in your head tells you, I am more worthy of happiness or abundance or success than someone else for whatever reason, because of who you are or where you're from or what you've experienced, that is the voice of ego. It is not the voice of intuition. Sometimes that can show up as judgment, right? So for example, I would never do what that person is doing, with the implication being because I'm better than them. So we might not agree with someone else's actions and that's fine. But when it becomes a problem is when, ego and judgment come into play and you're diminishing that person's humanity in relation to your own. Your intuition comes from the source of all that is, and the universe at its core is love, and we are all love, and we are all divine, and we are all equal. So your intuition will never tell you that you're better than other people. It just won't. It just will never come into play. If you are having those types of thoughts, I would really just take a moment to sit with that and witness that and start to question, why is that? And, so that way you can start to change it. So the fourth way that you can tell the difference between intuition and ego is that intuition is quiet and ego is loud. So this is actually an overlap between anxiety, fear, and ego. So for all three of those, they're going to be much louder than intuition. They're going to sound like alarm bells going off in your head. They're going to demand your attention. And that's because they're coming from a part of yourself that is linked to survival. So when you think of trauma responses like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, your ego is coming from that same part of your brain because it's trying to confront a threat to your survival. Only in the case of ego, it's not really a threat to your survival. It's a threat to how you will appear to others, which can sometimes cause that same kind of survival response. So your breath might speed up. You might start to panic. You might have that urge to do anything in your power, to try and keep this perceived threat from affecting your image. Right. So whether that's, doing what your ego is telling you to do, sticking to the social expectations of you, not taking that risk that feels good to your heart. Your intuition, on the other hand, will be quiet. It will whisper. So you will have to learn techniques to quiet your mind and regulate those trauma response emotions when they come up so that you can send that message to your body like, hey, I'm safe. I'm safe to be myself. I don't need to do what my ego is telling me to do. Quieting your mind is one of the most important ways that you can learn to follow your intuition. So, if you're interested in learning about 7 different tips and tricks to follow your intuition, you can find links to that in my playlist in the description below. So, thank you so much for listening, and please subscribe for my next series, How to Tell the Difference Between Intuition and Fear.